Good evening, welcome to MesmePolitics, last show of the week on Friday, the 5th of February 2021. My name's Toby Mesme, and we are with you for the next half hour. Bringing you all the latest in UK and US politics. From a unique leftist perspective, we'll be talking about the lunacy engulfing the Conservative Party, the Tory party's track record of racism, Biden on the war in Yemen, the QAnon lady being punished in Congress, also AOC and Rashida Tlaib, AOC and AOC's testimony regarding the horrendous abuse she's undergone and the harassment and the fear regarding the incursion on the US Capitol. I also want to talk to you about, in a minute, how, yes, this is real, a coal mine is being opened in the UK in 2021. But we kick off today with Joanna Cherry. This is a story regarding the SNP. So last Wednesday's SNP Westminster Group meeting was fraught. This is from The Guardian. By all accounts, with MP after MP telling their leader, Ian Blackford, that they had had enough. Some were on the verge of tears, reportedly lengthy phone calls persuading valued activists not to leave the party, while others raised angry exchanges and repeated threats to sue on social media. The context was the increasingly toxic row within the SNP over transgender law reform, and later that evening the party leader, Nicola Sturgeon, posted a video statement on Twitter in which she stated categorically that there was zero tolerance towards transphobia in her party. But the meeting's focus was Joanna Cherry, admired cross-party for her legal challenges during the Brexit crisis, and who, only 3 years earlier, came within one vote of beating Blackford in his role as Westminster leader of the SNP. She is also an unrepentant champion of concerns around the erosion of women's rights and one of Sturgeon's fiercest internal critics. A senior Westminster source said she was turning out to be a really disruptive influence on the group, and some folk at the meeting were visibly upset at her behaviour. So what's the problem, you ask? Well, the problem, allow me to elaborate on it. So, this is another article here. Jacob Rees-Mogg, a cabinet minister and close ally of Boris Johnson, has backed Cherry's right to be heard after the SNP politician gave a speech in the House of Commons arguing for the right to, quote, debate the ideology that any man can self-identify as a woman. That's right. Joanna Cherry is a bigot. She is a transphobe. We can have a listen here to some of the exchanges in the Commons.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Across our society, and particularly in universities and the third sector, women and some men are losing their jobs, having their positions undermined, and their personal safety put in jeopardy, simply for questioning the ideology that any man can self-identify as a woman, and for speaking up for women's sex-based rights under the Equality Act. Does the Leader of the House agree with me that all Democrats should condemn such attacks on free speech? And can we have a debate about free speech and the importance of sex as a protected characteristic under the Equality Act?
Madam Deputy Speaker, may I begin by saying how sorry I am that the Honourable Lady has left the SNP front bench, not because I regularly agree with her, because I don't think that I do, but because she has made it clear that she is one of the most intelligent and careful scrutinisers of government, not just on her benches, but in this House. And when I was on the Brexit...
So when Jacob Rees-Mogg is saying that about you, you've probably hit on the wrong angle of things. So these people are dinosaurs, they're bigoted, it's plain and simple. Yes, no one should receive abuse for their views, fine. No one but a fringe would say otherwise. Equally, free speech is of course a right that everyone has to express their view as an elected official. That is fine. However, it is a minority view, this sort of quote-unquote gender-critical viewpoint that is basically built off a new form of transphobia, which is peddling the same tropes that were used against gay women in the 1980s and the 1990s. You know, they're dangerous, they're perverted, and peddling those myths about trans women in 2021. It is a viewpoint completely out of touch with modern society. It is a minority viewpoint among women in Britain, according to polling. Of course, everyone can express their opinion, no one's saying otherwise. However, the reason I think it's right Joanna Cherry has lost her position, and I'm saying kudos to the SNP on this, good on the SNP for taking a stance, is simply because this viewpoint, you can express it, go in another party and express it, it's not in line with the values of a progressive. If you want to be a progressive party, if you profess to be a progressive party, like the SNP so often do, then they're absolutely right to take action and say, this isn't in line with our values, you're not on our front bench team anymore. It's as simple as that. There are many more viewpoints, far more marginalised and suppressed. The entire British establishment and sort of the mainstream, I say mainstream feminism, but I mean basically wealthy white women in newspaper columns, you know, the majority of women, as I say, and overwhelming majority of younger, more radical feminists are completely in favour of trans rights. We're talking about older, rich white women in newspaper columns, but that aspect of feminism, which is only a small slice of actual feminism, is not in line with the values of progressives, and it is not a viewpoint that is suppressed and shuttered out because they're on TV all the time. It's not a minority view. It is a minority view. It's not a marginalised viewpoint. These people get a hearing. Jacob Rees-Mogg will praise you in the House of Commons for expressing these views. Plain and simple as that. So that's why the moral panic over this is just a bit blinkered, a bit stupid. And Labour should get tougher on this. Labour should come out unequivocally on one side or the other. Keir Starmer is peddling the line of legitimate concerns. Meanwhile, in this country, this is happening. So pressure is growing on the government over its support for a new coal mine in Cumbria, as the UK prepares to host the most important UN climate summit since the Paris Agreement was signed in 2015. Developing country experts, scientists, green campaigners and government advisors are increasingly concerned about the seeming contradiction of ministers backing the new mine, which is, you heard me, the UK's first new deep coal mine in 3 decades, which will produce coking coal, mostly for export, until 2049, while gathering support from world leaders for a fresh deal on the climate crisis. Remembering, of course, the UK is set to host the COP26 UN Climate Summit in Glasgow in November, at which countries will be asked to sign up to long-term targets of net zero emissions by 2030, and to submit long-term national plans setting out reductions to their emissions between now and 2030. And developing country experts told The Guardian they were worried about the signal the UK government was sending to poor countries, many of which are considering whether to invest in green energy or coal for the future. This is 2021. In 2021, this is what we're talking about. Until 2049. I can't believe that this is up for debate. I can't believe this is a thing we're actually considering, even from this government. The Johnson government has thoroughly killed any credibility it had on the matter of climate change. It is basically counteracting all the nice words we've heard on the matter of the climate crisis. And they've killed all credibility with the Biden administration regarding getting the US to collaborate with Britain on the matter of climate change. And presumably, that was what Johnson wanted to do, but seemingly not. There is something we do need to say, which we need to avoid climate Thatcherism. We can't penalise all these post-industrial areas. You can't have jobs. You know, we don't care. No, instead of going hard in on that, we have to support people in a transition to higher quality, better, safer, higher paid jobs. We cannot leave these people without a safety net, because jobs will be lost in this transition and those jobs have to be replaced, and we have to guarantee that those jobs will be replaced. We need to avoid climate Thatcherism. We also need to avoid continuing the vandalism of our country and of the world that this would entail. Here's Matt Hancock quickly talking about vaccines. Have a listen.
The vaccine programme's going great guns, and we've now almost 11 million people vaccinated, including 90% of the over 80s. We're on track to make sure that we offer to the most vulnerable groups a vaccine by the 15th of February. And my goal is that I want us to be able to offer a vaccine to all over 50s. That's priority groups 1 to 9 by May. There's a lot of things that we've got to get right in order to hit that goal. And obviously supply is the most difficult of all of those. But we're currently on track for that. And thanks to the huge amount of effort from the NHS and everybody involved in making this happen, we're on track to get there. And obviously that is a critical part of getting everybody out of this.
All the ministers are having a lovely time at the moment because they're now no longer the most hated people in Britain because they're doing a good job for once. It's amazing. And again, it's because it's being done through the NHS instead of private contractors, and all this wrangling was pointless. But they're living it up. They're loving it. Now, quickly over to the States before we get onto the big drama. I want to talk about this. So the Biden administration announced yesterday, that it would halt support of Saudi Arabia's offensive military operations in the Yemen, where the war has caused a gigantic humanitarian emergency on top of the coronavirus pandemic. Biden will also reportedly appoint experienced diplomat Timothy Lenderking as special envoy to Yemen. It remains to be seen exactly how this will play out, but as Senator Bernie Sanders noted in a statement, it looks like the start of a diplomatic push to get Saudi Arabia to end the brutal war in which it has been bogged down since 2015 with UK and US support, obtain a general ceasefire and coordinate an international aid effort. The Saudi military basically cannot do anything without US support, and any strong signals from America that it should knock it off probably will be heeded. That's especially true now that Trump is gone and Saudi dictator Mohammed bin Salman faces possible recrimination for ordering the cold-blooded murder of a US resident and Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi back in 2018. That's from The Week, written by Ryan Cooper, a bit of the piece that I've just read out to you there. Now, Joe Biden talking about it. Have a listen.
This war has to end. And to underscore our commitment, we are ending all American support for offensive operations in the war in Yemen, including relevant arms sales.
So this is big, right? This is undeniably big. Fantastic. It's a notable improvement on US foreign policy. Britain is now an outlier, an international outlier in the West in terms of our unequivocal support for this brutal, hideous, unnecessary war in Yemen. And there are many, many lives on the conscience of the British government for that reason. US imperialism continues, however. Here's Biden going more in depth on what he wants to do regarding foreign policy.
America is back. America is back. Diplomacy is back at the center of our foreign policy. That's why yesterday the United States and Russia agreed to extend the New START treaty for 5 years to preserve the only remaining treaty between our countries safeguarding nuclear stability. At the same time, I made it clear to President Putin, in a manner very different from my predecessor, that the days of the United States rolling over in the face of Russia's aggressive actions, interfering with our elections, cyber attacks, poisoning its citizens, are over. We will not hesitate to raise the cost on Russia and defend our vital interest and our people.
Yeah, I know. Not a great start, is it? US imperialism continues. In many ways, it's going to be worse than Obama. It's going to be more hawkish on Russia. There's a complete political consensus among liberals and conservatives there. That can only be a problem. It's going to be much more hawkish on China. Again, that's a problem for international stability. So what we're going to have is we're going to have improvement in Yemen and in the approach towards Saudi Arabia. But in those other areas, it's going to be worse than Trump. It's certainly going to be worse than Obama. But we can celebrate that shift. That will change lives. That will improve people's lives if the US get the hell out and leave those poor people in Yemen alone. Stop supporting the effort.
We'll also take on directly the challenges posed by our prosperity, security, and democratic values by our most serious competitor, China. We'll confront China's economic abuses, counter its aggressive, coercive action to push back on China's attack on human rights, intellectual property, and global governance. But we are ready to work with Beijing when it's in America's interest to do so. Investing in our diplomacy isn't something we do just because it's the right thing to do for the world. We do it in order to live in peace, security, and prosperity. We do it because it's in our own naked self-interest. When we strengthen our alliances, we amplify our power, as well as our ability to disrupt threats before they can reach our shores.
Naked self-interest being the watchword there. But a welcome development on Yemen. And we need to open the discussion in America among progressives on what the vision of a progressive American foreign policy would be, how we'd sell it to the American public, and how it would work when implemented if we get a progressive administration one day in control of the state apparatus of the US, where it will obviously face roadblocks that make the roadblocks the Trump administration came up to look like speed bumps. In an incredibly unusual show of disapproval from one of its members, the House of Representatives on Thursday voted to strip freshman Georgia lawmaker Marjorie Taylor Greene of all her committee assignments in the wake of escalating controversy of her past support of conspiracy theories, violent rhetoric, and other behaviour. The House voted 230 to 199 to remove Greene from the Education and Budget Committees. House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer said in a speech on Thursday, "I have never encountered a situation like the one before us now, where a member has made such vile and hurtful statements, engaged in the harassment of colleagues, and expressed support for political violence. None of us should take any pleasure in what we must do today, but to do nothing would be an abdication of our moral responsibility to our colleagues, to the House, to our values, to the truth, and to our country." So AOC and Rashida Tlaib, sorry, I've got the name wrong there, but yeah. So Rashida and AOC talked about this in the House in a debate. It's a really, really emotional, moving illustration of why something had to be done from Tlaib, in the House.
Spoke.
This is so hard because, as many of my colleagues know, my closest colleagues know, on my very first day of orientation, I got my first death threat. It was a serious one. They took me aside. The FBI had to go to the gentleman's home. I didn't even get sworn in yet, and someone wanted me dead for just existing. More came later, uglier, more violent. One celebrating and writing the New Zealand massacre and hoping that more would come. Another mentioning my dear son, Adam. Mentioning him by name. Each one paralyzed me each time. So what happened on January 6th, all I could do was thank Allah that I wasn't here. I felt overwhelming relief, and I feel bad for Alexandria, so many of my colleagues that were here. But as I saw it, I thought to myself, thank God I am not there. I saw the images that they didn't get to see until later.
Solidarity with AOC and Rashida Tlaib. Solidarity with these women. They absolutely deserve our solidarity. The abuse they undergo for being women of colour who espouse progressive politics from all sides. Don't forget when the House tried to penalise Ilhan Omar for daring to critique the American Israel lobby, which is a documented thing. It's not a conspiracy theory. And it's Rashida Tlaib. Sorry. Apologies for my pronunciation there. But I've got it right in the end. So, really, really horrific, harrowing stuff going on here. Greene absolutely has a right to sit. She's an elected representative. There should be no restrictions on that. If there are, they'll get turned back on the left. Does she have a right to be included? No, of course not. She can sit there. No one has to talk to her. No one has to do anything with her. She should be completely boycotted. Her views are so beyond the pale, it defies belief. But she has an absolute right to sit in Congress, of course. No one's questioning that. Awful, awful, awful. It really does defy words how awful this whole situation is. solidarity with these women and the track record of this particular individual, just the hideousness of it, really does defy belief. The conspiracies, the anti-Semitism, the Islamophobia, all espoused by her, is so beyond the pale that I don't think there was any other option than to do what happened. Here's a clip of her from the BBC.
I was allowed to believe things that weren't true, and I would ask questions about them and talk about them. And that is absolutely what I regret.
Hey everyone, this is Marjorie Green, and I want to wish you all a Happy New Year's. How do you get avid gun owners and people that support the Second Amendment to give up their guns and go along with anti-gun legislation? How do you do that? Maybe you accomplish that by performing a mass shooting into a crowd that is very likely to be conservative.
Of school shootings.
Have you guys been following 4chan, Q, any of that stuff? Q is a patriot. We know that for sure, but we do not know who Q is. Basically, the deep state.
Right, so, you know, she's full wacko, basically. And I don't tend to call people wackos because often that's just used to discredit people that are outside the mainstream. But no, she's legitimately insane. And I think she actually believes what she's peddling. Horrendous situation. Now back over to our own lunatics in the UK. Maybe get our own house in order before we talk about America's. Boris Johnson has been urged to act after 2 more Conservative MPs linked to figures spreading COVID conspiracy theories or making discredited claims. Last week it emerged that Desmond Swayne, a former Tory minister, encouraged anti-lockdown street protesters to persist and suggested NHS capacity figures were being, quote, manipulated to exaggerate the severity of this particular virus, the virus that has wreaked havoc upon all our lives for the last year. Questions are now being asked about the judgment of 2 further MPs, Andrew Bridgen, who defended Swayne in an interview on the YouTube channel of a controversial former BBC journalist whose posts have been taken down by YouTube for spreading false information about COVID, and also Adam Afrayi, MP for Windsor. After refusing to apologise to that same activist who Bridgen spoke to last week, Anna Breeze, Angela Rayner has called on the Prime Minister to wake up to the threat of disinformation and conspiracy theories being legitimised or perpetrated from within his own party's ranks. The loonies in the Tory party, they've always been there. They went overboard on the Europe thing. Then they went overboard on the lockdown thing. Now they're going into full conspiratorial territory. These people will always find things to be unnecessarily angry about. Maybe it'll be trans rights. Maybe it'll be Europe. Maybe it'll be now COVID. They will always find things to be loonies about. It's a failure of leadership in the Tory party not to get a grip on this, mitigate it, control it, penalise it. It's not a free speech thing, right? You can say what you want. And if that gets you elected to Parliament, great. But what the Tory party is telling us by keeping the whip with these people is that this is in line with their values. Their values as a party. Disgusting. These people are dangerous. Really, really dangerous peddling what they're peddling. They have a right to peddle it. Free speech. However, the Tory party, they don't have an inalienable right to be allowed in a mainstream centre-right party. And they should absolutely get rid of them. Of course. Now, the Prime Minister, on more Tory drama, the Prime Minister's senior advisor on ethnic minorities considered resigning over fears the Tory party was pursuing a politics steeped in division. Samuel Kasumu reportedly retracted his resignation letter, in which he said tensions in the government were at times unbearable after talks with the vaccine minister, Nadhim Zahawi. In a letter to Boris Johnson seen by the BBC, Kasumu also raised concerns about the conduct of Kemi Badenoch, the Equalities Minister, suggesting she may have broken the ministerial code when she publicly criticised a black journalist on social media. He wrote, "I fear for what may become of the party in the future by choosing to pursue a politics steeped in division. That damage is often caused by our own actions, and it's not often considered." The Tory party in Britain, above all the other parties that all have problematic legacies, is the party of racism in Britain today. It's not UKIP, it's not the Brexit Party. It is the mainstream, with a majority of 80 in the House of Commons Conservative Party. Many positions that were considered fringe and were adopted by the BNP in 2010 would now be at home accepted doctrine of the Johnson government. Look at their old policies from the 80s, the 90s. Pretty much all of it has been adopted and is being implemented by our current Conservative government. No one cares and no one scrutinises. They don't scrutinise because the Tory party is still the party of the 1%, and they're willing to put up with a hell of a lot in order to let the party of the 1% serve the 1%. Shameful. No one's doing anything about it. No one recognises it. People think Labour are the racist party. Sure, there's plenty of racism. There's all forms of racism in all the parties. You've got tons of Islamophobia. You've got anti-Semitism. You've got anti-black racism in the Labour Party and in the Tory Party. However, the scale in the Tory Party, and no one's looking at it. No one's looking at it. Zora Sultana talking about Cuba's humanitarian medical brigade here.
Hi, I'm Zara Sultana, Labour Member of Parliament for Coventry South in the West Midlands in England. The Henry Reeve International Medical Brigade has a long history of responding to emergencies. From sending teams to West Africa to treat Ebola patients in 2014, to responding to floods and earthquakes from Chile and Ecuador to Pakistan and Nepal. Now again, Cuban doctors have provided hope and inspiration through this pandemic, travelling to 40 countries to help fight coronavirus. What makes this even more remarkable is the fact that Cuba has faced decades of blockade from the United States. The internationalism by the Cuban people and the medical brigade is an incredible example of humanity and solidarity across borders. That is why I am proud to have officially nominated the Henry Reeve International Medical Brigade for the 2021 Nobel Peace Prize. Solidarity.
Solidarity with the Cuban people, Cuba and the Cuban people and the Cuban government. Right, once again, on the right side of history. A few things to clear up before we go for the week. There has been a slight change, so we will now be doing this 7 p.m. every day, same time, same place, Monday to Friday, having the weekend off to recharge each weekend. So we will be back at 7 p.m. on Monday. I'll leave you with this clip now of Keir Starmer talking about mental health. Quite good from Keir Starmer here.
How has the latest lockdown affected you?
3.0 feels very different to the first lockdown for so many different reasons.
This one's definitely been much harder, and I think that's the same for a lot of young people. I went to Stevenage to one of them. There's a mass vaccine centre there, and there were lots of people coming in, older people, to be vaccinated, coming in really anxious, going out with a real smile. And I realised I hadn't seen human beings in the flesh smiling for a year. And it was a real reminder to me as to, I had to take a minute for myself in that. I don't think we've acknowledged just what a deep impact this has had on all of us, but I think particularly on young people who, in a sense, have borne the brunt of a lot of the last 10 years, I think. They're taking the brunt of the economic hit now because of the pandemic. We need much more provision for mental health. We don't take it seriously enough. It isn't on a par with physical health. And many more people have mental health issues than we imagine, and we need to acknowledge that. But I think we need to talk about it a lot more as well. We need to be honest with each other about it and support each other.
Yeah, and the point that you make about talking about it is so key.
Also check out on Twitter the Peace and Justice Project. Jeremy Corbyn has put up a 2-minute video describing what the project has achieved and what they hope to achieve going forward since their launch. That is it for Friday, the end of this week. We will be back on Monday from 7 p.m. with more. Please subscribe, turn notifications on, tell your friends. I've been Toby Lapati Mesme. This has been MesmePolitics. I'll see you next week. Between then and now, get in touch with me on email, tobyjoshua2004@gmail.com. You can get me on Twitter @TobyJoshuaUK or on Medium. Every single weekday there will be a 5-minute read up there, and that's @TobyJoshuaPolitics. Have a lovely weekend. I will see you on the other side of it with plenty more, all the latest every weekday in UK and US politics from a leftist perspective.